My name is Grace. I'm a twin, born just 4 minutes before my sister, Chloe. 4 minutes. Not long by any measure, but it felt like the universe stamped those 4 minutes with a weight that would shape our entire lives. From the moment we came into the world, blinking under the hospital lights, our parents, David and Sarah, looked at us and somehow saw two completely different people. Chloe was their delicate miracle, the tiny one who needed gentle hands and hushed voices. I was the sturdy one, the one who didn't cry as loud, the one who seemed, even as a baby, ready to face the world head-on. Or, more accurately, the one they decided could face the world head-on, so they didn't have to worry as much. We grew up in a quiet, tree-lined town in Texas, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and appearances mattered. Our house was comfortable, but inside, the emotional landscape was anything but. Chloe was the sun, and I was the shadow it cast. Her birthdays were elaborate affairs with bouncy castles and catered snacks, princess dresses and shiny new toys. Mine were smaller, quieter, often involving practical gifts like school books or new clothes, sometimes even chores. I remember our 7th birthday, Chloe had a petting zoo in the backyard and got an instant camera she'd been begging for. I was assigned to help Mom clean up the endless stream of plates and napkins. When I asked why, Mom just smiled that tight, dismissive smile she reserved for me and said, "Grace, you're the older sister. You're strong. You can handle it. Chloe is more sensitive." Sensitive. That word became a shield for Chloe and a weapon against me. Chloe spilled juice. I got blamed for not watching her. Chloe scraped her knee. I was expected to fetch the band-aids and comfort her, even if she'd been the one who pushed me. When I brought home a perfect report card with all A's, Dad would nod and say, "Good job, Grace. Knew you could do it. You're so independent." But when Chloe got a B+ on a test she'd struggled with, Mom would call all her friends, bragging about how Chloe worked so hard and was overcoming challenges. It wasn't just about gifts or praise, it was the fundamental way they saw us. Chloe needed nurturing, I needed, well, nothing apparently, because I was strong. That word, strong, became the justification for every instance of neglect. Didn't get the best portion of dinner? You're strong, you don't need it as much. Didn't get to go on the family trip because Chloe wanted to bring a friend and there wasn't enough room? You're strong, you can entertain yourself. Need help with homework? You're strong, figure it out. It was the constant, quiet erosion of my self-worth, a message hammered home daily. You are less important, less deserving of care, simply because you possess a quality we find convenient to exploit. There was one particularly painful memory that stuck with me. In middle school, I spent months working on a complex art project for a regional competition, a mixed-media piece telling a story about resilience. I poured my heart into it. The night before the submission deadline, Mom needed Chloe to help pick out an outfit for a school dance. Chloe, in a fit of drama over not having the perfect shoes, threw a small tantrum, knocking over a shelf in the garage where my finished project was carefully leaning. It was damaged, paint smeared, elements bent. Mom rushed to comfort Chloe, fussing over her tears about the dance. When I gasped and pointed at my ruined project, Dad just sighed and said, "Well, that's a shame, Grace. But it's just art. Chloe's upset needs attention right now. You're strong, you can probably fix it quickly or just enter it as is. It's just a local thing." I stood there, heartbroken, the hours of work ruined, the deepest cut being their utter dismissal of something that mattered so much to me. It wasn't just that they didn't care about the project, they didn't care about my heartbreak. Liam, my friend from down the street who happened to be over, saw the whole thing. He didn't say much then, but later that week, he quietly brought over some of his own art supplies and just sat with me in silence while I tried, futilely, to salvage the piece. Liam was the first person who didn't benefit from the favoritism but simply witnessed the injustice. He saw me when they didn't. The only other person who offered a flicker of genuine connection was my Aunt Claire. She lived a few towns over and wasn't around often, but when she was, she had a way of looking at me that made me feel real. She was a writer herself, and one birthday she gave me a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of good pens. "Your eyes see stories, Grace," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Write them down. No one can take your words from you." I clung to her words and that journal like a lifeline. It was in its pages that I first dared to write down the messy, confused feelings about my family, about being the strong one who secretly longed to be cared for. High school was more of the same, just on a larger scale. I buried myself in academics and the school newspaper, honing my writing skills, seeing it as my escape route. Chloe floated through, popular and charming, effortlessly getting by on personality, and the path smoothed by our parents. They talked endlessly about Chloe's future, her potential sorority, her decorating ideas for her dorm room. My future was rarely mentioned, and when it was with that familiar shrug and "Grace will figure it out." The bomb finally dropped senior year. Sitting at the dinner table, Mom cleared her throat. "Kids," she started too brightly, "we need to talk about college." My heart gave a little leap. Maybe, just maybe, they'd figured it out. Maybe they'd saved enough. "As you know," Dad jumped in, not meeting my eyes, "college is expensive. We've saved diligently, enough for one of you. And we've decided that will be Chloe." He said it so matter-of-factly, like they were announcing a change in dinner plans. Chloe looked down, fiddling with her fork, not surprised. Maybe a little uncomfortable, but not protesting. "Chloe needs this structured environment," Mom added, looking directly at me now. "She needs the full college experience to really thrive. Grace, you're so independent. You can go to community college, work part-time, figure it out. You're strong." That sentence. Again. But this time, it didn't just sting. It severed something inside me. It wasn't a question of if I could figure it out. It was that they expected me to, demanded me to, because it was easier for them. They weren't even sorry. There were no apologies, no attempts to soften the blow, just a statement of fact delivered with the casual cruelty that only years of ingrained favoritism can create. That night, I didn't cry. I just felt a cold, quiet resolve settle deep in my bones. They had made their choice clear, not just for college, but for my entire life. Fine. If they weren't going to build a path for me, I would build my own. And I would build it so strong, so high, they wouldn't be able to ignore it, even if they wanted to. I left home 2 weeks after graduation. I had $312 saved from my meager part-time jobs, the clothes on my back, 2 suitcases, and the laptop Aunt Claire had given me years ago, now my most prized possession. My parents were busy helping Chloe pack for her freshman orientation weekend, buying her new bedding, organizing her move-in. They barely noticed when I put my bags in Liam's beat-up truck. Mom gave me a quick, awkward hug that didn't quite connect, and Dad just nodded from the porch, saying, "Keep in touch, Grace. Be careful out there." Chloe was already on the phone, probably coordinating something about the weekend. I didn't look back as Liam drove away. The house, the symbol of my childhood, felt less like a home I was leaving and more like a cage I was escaping. Liam drove me to a small town about an hour outside Chicago, where I'd found a tiny, cheap room for rent in a dilapidated house shared with a few other students from the local community college. The room was barely big enough for a single bed and a desk. The walls were stained, and the floorboards creaked with every step. But it was mine. No one else's. No yelling, no comparisons. Just silence and the peeling paint looking back at me. It was the first place I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up too much space. The next few years were a blur of exhaustion and relentless effort. I enrolled full-time at the community college, choosing classes strategically to maximize credits that could transfer. By day, I was a student. By night, I worked any job I could get. I waited tables at a noisy late-night diner, cleaned offices downtown from midnight to 4 a.m., and sometimes on weekends, worked retail shifts that stretched 10 hours. There were nights I was so tired I fell asleep on the bus ride home, missing my stop, adding another hour to my already impossible schedule. Food was ramen, instant oatmeal, whatever was cheapest and fastest. I was always sore, always sleep-deprived, but I never complained. I couldn't afford to. There was no safety net, no one to bail me out if I failed. It was just me. I poured all my energy into my studies and my writing. Professor Carter, a seemingly gruff but kind-hearted journalism instructor at the community college, noticed my dedication. He saw the raw potential in my work, the hunger in my eyes. He pulled me aside one day. "Grace," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You write like you've got something to prove. Use that fire. He introduced me to digital storytelling, showing me how words, images, and sound could be woven together to create something powerful, something that could reach people. It felt like a revelation. This was a way to tell stories that mattered, stories about people who were overlooked, stories that deserved to be seen. It resonated with me on a deeply personal level. During this time, I tried working on a personal writing project, a nonfiction piece about resilience in the face of hardship. I submitted it to a small online literary journal, hoping for feedback, anything. The rejection email was polite but blunt. My voice was too rough, the narrative unpolished, the theme overdone. It landed hard, echoing the dismissals of my childhood creative efforts. I almost gave up, the exhaustion and doubt threatening to swallow me whole. I called Liam, pouring out my frustration. He just listened, then said, "Rough and unpolished sounds real to me, Grace. Maybe you just need to find the right place for that kind of real." His simple faith in me was a small, steady light. Inspired by Professor Carter and needing a bigger platform, I applied to a 4-year university program in Chicago focusing on digital media and investigative journalism. Getting in felt like a miracle. Figuring out how to pay for it felt impossible. But I pieced it together with scholarships, grants, and the grim determination to keep working multiple jobs. Moving into Chicago proper was another step up, a tiny room in a shared apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, but it was closer to school and potential opportunities. The city was vast, loud, and indifferent, a perfect place to disappear and build something in the shadows. University life was another level of intensity. The coursework was challenging, the competition fierce. Many of my classmates came from privileged backgrounds, their biggest worry choosing which club to join or where to go for spring break. I was worried about making rent, balancing 3 jobs, and finding time to sleep more than 4 hours a night. I felt like an imposter walking onto that gleaming campus every day, my worn clothes and tired eyes a stark contrast to their effortless polish. It was in one of my advanced classes that I met Ms. Taylor, a legend in the world of digital journalism. She was sharp, demanding, and had zero tolerance for mediocrity. Her feedback was brutal, dissecting my work with surgical precision. But underneath the criticism, I sensed she saw something. She pushed me harder than anyone ever had, tearing down my writing and building it back up, forcing me to find the most powerful, concise ways to tell a story. She didn't offer coddling. She offered the chance to become excellent. Around this time, I'd occasionally get brief, awkward calls from my parents. They weren't checking in on me. Not really. It was usually Mom, asking if I'd talked to Chloe lately, or Dad mentioning something Chloe was doing. "Chloe's doing so well in her marketing program," Mom would say. "She's networking, building her brand. She's a natural." They seemed oblivious to my life, still wrapped up in Chloe's world. One time, Mom called specifically to ask if I could lend Chloe some money because she'd overspent her allowance. I was standing in my tiny kitchen, staring at a package of discounted ramen, and I just couldn't speak. It wasn't anger I felt, just that familiar, heavy emptiness. I hung up without saying yes or no. Then there was the time I bumped into Chloe on campus. She was visiting a friend in a different department. She looked perfect, of course, expensive clothes, perfect hair, chatting brightly on her phone. She saw me, did a slight double take at my tired appearance, and gave a quick, slightly condescending smile. "Oh, hey, Grace. Still here? Wow, you look busy." She didn't ask about my classes, my jobs, or my life. Just that dismissive comment. It was a small moment, but it highlighted the chasm between us, a chasm built by years of unequal footing. Inspired by Professor Carter and pushed by Ms. Taylor, I decided to pour everything I had into a major independent project for Ms. Taylor's capstone class, a multimedia investigation into a predatory lending practice targeting low-income families in Chicago. It was a massive undertaking, requiring extensive research, interviews, photography, video, and building a dedicated website. I knew it was risky, both in terms of the time commitment and the subject matter. I worked relentlessly, fueled by a grim determination. The project was incredibly difficult. Sources were hesitant to talk, scared of retaliation. I faced technical hurdles with the website design and video editing, spending hours teaching myself new software because I couldn't afford help. And then came the pressure. After I started asking pointed questions and getting close to uncovering specific abuses, I began receiving anonymous emails and even a couple of veiled threats, warnings to drop the story, reminding me I was just a student and should know my place. It was terrifying. I debated stopping, the fear gnawing at me. I called Liam, not telling him about the threats, but just about feeling overwhelmed and scared of failing. "You're doing something important, Grace," he said. "Something that matters. That's always going to be hard. But you're not a quitter." His words, simple as they were, gave me just enough strength to keep going. Miss Taylor, sensing my struggle, pulled me aside. "Your research is solid, Grace. Don't let fear make you compromise the truth. Finish it. Do it right." There was a moment, late one night, staring at my half-finished website, surrounded by empty ramen containers and research notes, where I just broke down. The exhaustion, the fear, the years of feeling unseen and undervalued. It all crashed down. What was I doing? Was this worth it? Was I just chasing a dream that would leave me broken and alone? The memory of my parents' dismissive faces, of Chloe's easy life, felt like weights dragging me down. But then I looked at the faces in the photographs on my screen, the people my project was about. Their stories, their resilience in the face of being exploited. They were counting on me to tell their truth. I thought of Aunt Claire's journal, of Professor Carter's belief, of Liam's quiet support, of Ms. Taylor's demanding push for excellence. I wasn't doing this for my parents anymore. I was doing it for them, for myself, for the principle that some stories deserve to be told, no matter how hard the telling is. I wiped my tears, brewed another pot of terrible coffee, and went back to work. I finally launched the project website quietly. For the first few days, nothing much happened. A few views, mostly classmates and Professor Carter. I felt a familiar wave of disappointment. Maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Then something shifted. A prominent Chicago-based journalist, someone I deeply admired, tweeted a link to my project with a single word: compelling. That was it. But it was like dropping a match on dry kindling. Suddenly, the site traffic exploded. Local news outlets picked up the story. National journalism blogs started writing about the project's innovative format and the depth of its reporting. My email inbox became a flood of interview requests, messages of support, and inquiries about my work. It was overwhelming, surreal. And then came the email that changed everything. An official notification that my project had won the Digital Vanguard Fellowship, a national award recognizing innovative digital storytelling with social impact. The fellowship came with significant funding for future projects, mentorship from leaders in the field, and an invitation to an awards ceremony in New York City. I read the email sitting at my desk, in my tiny, cluttered apartment. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. Years of struggle, of feeling invisible, of being told I was just strong enough to be left to fend for myself. It all culminated in this moment of profound, external validation. My first instinct was to call my parents. Maybe this would make them see. I sent Mom a text. "Just won the Digital Vanguard Fellowship. It's a national award for my journalism project." The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared, then disappeared. A few minutes later, she replied, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you see Chloe's latest Instagram post? She hit 50K followers." That was it. No questions about the fellowship, the project, or how I felt. Just a swift, effortless pivot back to Chloe. The familiar emptiness returned, but this time, it was accompanied by a strange sense of finality. Okay, that chapter is closed. They won't change. I don't need them to. I called Aunt Claire, sharing the news. She cried over the phone, her voice filled with a pride that warmed me to my core. "I told you, Grace," she sobbed happily. "I told you they'd see you eventually. Or if they didn't, the world would." I emailed Professor Carter and Ms. Taylor, who both sent congratulatory messages that were short on fuss but long on genuine pride in my work and perseverance. Liam sent a simple text: "Knew you would. Congrats, G." These were my people. The ones who saw me. The trip to New York was a whirlwind. I borrowed a simple, elegant navy dress from a classmate, the nicest thing I owned by far. Stepping into the awards venue felt like entering a different world. It was beautiful, filled with accomplished people I'd only read about. I felt a ripple of imposter syndrome, quickly squashed by the memory of the countless late nights and the sheer effort it took to get here. When they called my name, Grace Miller, recipient of the Digital Vanguard Fellowship, the room erupted in applause. Walking onto that stage, the lights bright, felt surreal. This wasn't about proving anything to my parents anymore. This was about honoring the struggle, the work, the people whose stories I told. Holding the award felt heavy, significant. My hands trembled slightly, but my gaze was steady. I earned this, every single step of the way. And then I saw them, standing awkwardly near the back, looking slightly out of place but trying to project an air of proud parental attendance. My parents, David and Sarah, and even Chloe. They must have seen the news or the ceremony details online and decided to show up uninvited, wanting to bask in the reflected glory, perhaps expecting a tearful reunion and public acknowledgement from the stage. The sight of them sent a jolt through me, a mix of shock and a familiar tightening in my chest. I looked away, focusing on the presenter, determined not to let their unexpected presence steal my moment. Towards the end of the ceremony came the unexpected announcement. This year's recipient of the Inspirational Storyteller Award, a special recognition for a Digital Vanguard Fellow, whose work and journey exemplify profound resilience and impact. My breath caught. They called my name again. Walking back onto the stage for a second time, the applause felt even louder longer. In my brief, impromptu speech, I spoke about the importance of telling stories that are often overlooked, about the power of finding your voice, even when others try to silence it, and about the communities that need to be seen. It was a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement of my own journey, delivered directly from the spotlight. After the ceremony, navigating the crowded reception, I saw my parents and Chloe trying to approach me, navigating the crowd awkwardly. Their smiles looked forced, their eyes darting around, perhaps looking for important people to impress. I braced myself. Mom reached me first, her voice tight. "Grace. Oh, sweetie, we are so proud." Dad nodded beside her, looking uncomfortable. "Yeah, Grace. Great job. Really something." Chloe stood slightly behind them, looking unsure, maybe a little envious. They tried to hug me, but it felt stiff, performative. "We saw it online," Mom explained, as if that justified their sudden appearance after years of absence. They started asking about the award, the prize money, the fellowship, their questions focused purely on the external markers of success. Just then, a woman with an air of quiet authority and a warm smile approached. It was Evelyn Reed, the editor-in-chief of a major national news organization, someone I idolized. "Grace," she said, extending a hand. "Evelyn Reed, your project is extraordinary, truly moving. And your story, your resilience is inspiring." She turned slightly to my parents, who puffed out their chests, ready to introduce themselves as the proud parents. But Evelyn Reed kept her focus on me. "We have a mentorship program for rising talent like you," she continued, lowering her voice slightly so only I could hear. "We'd like to offer you a spot. It would mean moving to New York, working closely with our investigative team, full support for a year so you can focus purely on your craft. What do you say?" I stared at her stunned. This was it. The opportunity one had dreamed of, offered by someone I deeply respected, based purely on my merit and hard work. I looked past her, back at my parents and Chloe, still standing there awkwardly, their faces falling slightly as they realized this conversation wasn't about them. "Ms. Reed," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I'm ready." "Thank you." In the days that followed, my story gained more traction. Articles were written about my award, mentioning my challenging background. My parents and Chloe called, more persistent now. Mom invited me home for a family dinner. "Just us," she said, her voice softer than usual, a clear attempt to bridge the gap. "We want to talk. Really talk." After some hesitation and conferring with Liam, who encouraged me to go, not for them, but for myself and my own closure, I agreed. It was time to face them, not as the overlooked child, but as the woman I had become. Walking back into that house on Evergreen Street felt strange. It looked the same, the worn sofa, the slightly too loud Texas decor, the photos on the mantelpiece, mostly of Chloe. But I was different. And the way they looked at me was different too, a mixture of pride, the kind you feel for a stranger who did something impressive, awkwardness, and maybe a hint of fear. Dad fidgeted with his glasses. Mom hovered, offering drinks. Chloe sat on the stairs again, watching, her usual easy confidence replaced by a quiet tension. Dinner was stilted, filled with forced small talk. Afterwards, in the living room, Mom began. Grace, she started, her voice trembling slightly. We haven't been fair to you. We know that now. Dad nodded mutely. We were young, and we just thought you were so capable. So strong. We thought you'd be fine. There it was. The word. Again. I took a deep breath, years of suppressed emotion swirling inside me. But I wasn't angry. Just calm, sad, and resolved. Yeah, I said, my voice steady, meeting their eyes without flinching for the first time in my life. I heard that my whole life. Grace is strong. Grace will figure it out. Grace doesn't need anything. You used my strength as an excuse. An excuse to give Chloe everything I wasn't given. Did you ever stop to think? My voice trembled slightly, but I held it steady. That maybe I didn't want to be strong all the time? That maybe I wished, just once, you would ask if I was tired? If I was okay? Their faces fell. Mom's eyes welled up, but no tears fell. Dad looked away, shame etched on his face. Honestly, I continued, the words releasing a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Now. I don't need you to ask anymore. I figured it out. All by myself. Mom whispered, You're still our daughter. Can we start over? I smiled, a bittersweet sad smile. Start over? Maybe. But it won't be the same. Because I have boundaries now. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't live for that one-sided love. If you want to know me, the person I am now, I'll share. But I won't wait for you to see me anymore. Then, Chloe spoke from the stairs. Grace. I turned to look at her. She walked into the room, hesitant. Do you think you made things harder? She asked, her voice small. I mean, now Mom and Dad, they look at you differently. And I feel like I'll never be enough. I looked at her, truly looked at her. Not the favored twin, but a young woman burdened by expectations, now seeing the reality of her own less-earned path. Chloe, I said gently, I never did anything to make things harder for you. I just lived my life. I worked for what I deserved. And you can too. But you have to stand up on your own. You have to stop waiting for Mom and Dad to pave the way. There was nothing more to say. I stood up, gathered my small bag. As I walked out of the house, the silence wasn't awkward or heavy like it used to be. It felt light. Freeing. The invisible competition, the quiet resentment, the longing for acceptance. It was finally released into the Texas air behind me. Weeks later, I moved to New York City to start the mentorship program. The city was everything I dreamed of, loud, chaotic, full of life and stories waiting to be told. My small apartment wasn't much, but it was mine. My job was challenging and exciting. I was surrounded by people who saw my potential and valued my voice. I still talked to Liam, Professor Carter, and Ms. Taylor. I occasionally got texts from my parents, mostly updates about Chloe, sometimes a hesitant question about my work, but they didn't push for details. The dynamic had shifted. They were no longer the center of my universe whose approval I craved. They were just my parents, flawed and distant. I was no longer the unseen reflection, the overlooked twin, the strong one who didn't need care. I was just Grace, a storyteller, a journalist, a resilient woman who built her own life, stone by stone, story by story. And for the first time, that was more than enough. It was everything.